Hello, everybody. As always, around the Elul time, and today I'm recording this on the end of the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul. We like at the shul to have some programming that helps people think about and stimulates their experience for the upcoming high holidays. This year, just because of the quirks of the calendar, almost all of Elul will be before Labor Day, and it's not an obvious winner to get people to come into the shul for programming. So we decided to take advantage of some electronic possibilities, and we're going to have a couple of podcast kind of formats with people from the community to think together about some of the liturgy and some of the spiritual and social issues that come up around this high holidays 5787 about to be. And so I'm really glad to have a couple of folks here. We're going to have one of three. This is one of three such conversations that I'll be having with some members. I'm really glad to assemble these three folks for the first of these conversations. I would like to begin by asking you to just introduce yourselves and say something about who you are so that we'll all know, because many people in the shul know you, but some people might not. And we want to take advantage of this opportunity. So I will just go in clockwise order on at least on my screen here. Judy, say something. Welcome. Say something to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Judy Katz, speaking to you from Northwest Connecticut at the moment, but live across the street from Anshe Chesed. My husband and I, our family, have been longtime members. I'm a writer, teacher, former filmmaker, and happy to be in the conversation.
Debbie Greenberg.
I'm Debbie Greenberg, and Judy Katz is also a wonderful poet, um, and I'm a fan. I'm a continuously grateful member of Anshe Chesed. I've been member for 40 years. Currently retired. Joys in my life are being a docent at the Jewish Museum, so get in touch with me if you want a tour. And being a bubby. The spanning 100 years, having known my bubby and being a bubby to my two granddaughters is just a joy. And thank you for including me in this conversation.
You. Joseph.
Hi, everyone. I am Joe Alban. I live on the Upper West Side. I'm an acupuncturist with a practice on the Upper West Side. We're members of Anshe Chesed for a while now and have been in and out of the community for many, many, many years, living around this side and that side of the shul. We live in Lincoln Towers on 70th and West End. My oldest son, Sammy, will be a bar mitzvah in October. So that's a very exciting thing, and I'm excited to join the conversation here. Oh, and my sister also teaches art at the Jewish Museum, so maybe Debbie, you know her.
Wow.
Wow. We should talk afterwards.
Sure.
That's great. So for the theme for this conversation, what I wanted to pose is that talk a little bit about that most characteristic high holiday liturgy, the Unetaneh Tokef prayer. There's a long story, often repeated story that it's a medieval poem composed by somebody who's being persecuted by the church and martyred himself. This is not a correct, as a historical matter, it's not correct. Most academic scholars of synagogue poetry associate this with an earlier passage, not from Europe, but from the land of Israel or someplace else in the sort of Eastern Mediterranean, probably substantially older than that legend, 7th or 8th century. And the poem describes the awesome, frightening qualities about mortality. Who will live and who will die? How many will be born and how many will pass away? How many will be at peace and how many will be tormented, and who by fire and who by water? And then it will go on to offer, after terrifying us pretty well, it will offer a different path to think about. So we'll get to that in a second. But let's begin with the terrifying part. I can share the screen for a sec and show you, those of you who may be watching, in addition to listening. Here's on Safaria, we have the poem itself. It entails a kind of a pastoral metaphor. All the heavenly host is arrayed in judgment. Even angels are not guiltless. All humanity passes before you like a sheep, as a shepherd inspecting his flock, counting each and every one. On Rosh Hashanah, the decree is inscribed. On Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many pass away? How many are created, live and die, come to a timely end, an untimely end, who by fire or water, by sword and by beast, hunger and thirst, earthquake and plague, strangling and stoning, who at rest, who wandering, who will be serene and confused, who will be tranquil or tormented, who will become impoverished or who will become wealthy, who will be brought low, and who will be uplifted. Now, I want to begin by asking you, how do you react as a worshiper, as a synagogue attender, to the driving home of the terror of being a mortal person? Is that a helpful? Is that an interesting? Is that a daunting? Is it an obstacle that on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur we talk about the possibility that we're all going to die?
It's not a possibility. It's a reality. And I think for those of us of a certain age, it's a daily friend. So for me, my reaction to this prayer has changed over the years. And right now, coming into the holiday, I feel this is what we need to do to be human, is to remember this all the time. And when you get to be, I'm 73, that's a reality. And so to share that as a community is very powerful. And then what do you do with it? Because that is the question about what does it mean to be human?
So we will go to what do you do with it? Do you feel as you as one individual, and then we can ask the other two people on the call, do you have the carrying capacity? Is there enough capacity in your wiring to think about this on a daily basis, who by fire and who by water, and also on the awesome day? Is it an enhancement to the awesomeness of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to reflect on that vulnerability?
It's very intense on Rosh Hashanah in a way that it's not on a daily basis. But I feel like anybody who picks up the newspaper gets to answer those questions. And so it's really, how much do we pay attention to that? And can you hold that all the time and get out of bed? I don't think so. And I think that's one of the gems of the Jewish calendar, is the calendar knows we can't do this every single day, all day. But for a couple of weeks, I think it's very important to have that power and terror.
Joe, I happen to know one of your patients. Like you're involved in healing people and suffering. How does all of this? Who will suffer and who will be tormented? How does this sound to you as a practitioner of healing arts?
Well, I think that in the context of the whole thing, that passage always makes me think of the Leonard Cohen song, Who by Fire. But it reminds you of all the other things that were, and the torments going on in that time about who by this drug and who by that drug and depression and all of this stuff were going on in his life. But, uh, I think that part of it is it's also a motivator, right? Because it's sort of this thought process of engaging that we don't have a forever time. And so it puts that motivation behind us to think about we have the opportunity for this renewal during that period of time in the calendar. And how do you feel the power of that? Well, it's somewhat of it is a channeling into other things. And I mean, the passage also gives you that in a way that you're feeling that intensity and then channeling it into other things. But in terms of rationalization of how we know who gets suffer from what, I don't know if there is one. It's I think like Debbie said, you think about it intensely for a short period of time during the calendar year, but to think about it on a constant basis, I think would be hard and crippling. And you sometimes see it. You see this with people who obsess about uh, and have a tremendous amount of anxiety about their either symptoms or their own mortality, so much so that they can't function.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Judy, you want to add anything?
Um, I find it terrifying. Um, and the holidays come around every year and you're in a different place every year. Like Debbie was saying, she hears it differently as she gets older. And I think even though I feel like I think about mortality, and have had various losses, it's still terrifying as a melody and liturgy. Um, and which I do think, like, strikes some particular chord for this day and this season. But because there's been a loss in my family recently of somebody young and brilliant, and so who before their time, who in a timely way, there's also, it's just brings up a lot of other feelings, about how not in control we are.
Yeah, how it can seem, it certainly is in plenty of what we experience in the world, like your family's loss, just there seems an arbitrariness and randomness, and why does one gene fire and another gene doesn't fire, and there aren't whys. One of the things that over the years I've noted about this piece of liturgy, which is a very big high point for me, is that an obstacle that people often have is it's that in Rosh Hashanah it is inscribed, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed, and it seems um, to take make reference to the rabbinic lore image that God has three books, and one book is for the completely righteous people and they're fine, and one book is for the completely wicked people and they're zapped, and then there's the book for the intermediate people, which is everybody, and so it's kind of held in suspense. And I've over the years found that sometimes people really find this a tremendous obstacle because it seems to say that God is an utterly arbitrary despot. God is going to sign it away, and people, especially who've had losses. I remember when I was in rabbinical school, I presented this to a group of young people, and there was a woman whose mother had died on the eve of Yom Kippur, and she was like not having it. Okay, this was not a helpful piece of liturgy. However, I do think that that's not the best way to understand the prayer. I think the best way to understand the prayer is in the conversation that we're having right now. Is it's I think of it as breaking your heart open, because you do have to confront the reality that there's going to be some things ahead of you that are going to be very difficult, and some things that'll be wonderful. Um, and as Joe said, you have a limited amount of time. So what are you going to do about it? And the first part of the liturgy does include the phrase that the book speaks for itself, and every person has signed it with their own hand. Like the book in the poem is not really the God's arbitrary signature. It's that our construal of our own lives, our behavior, the way we live in the world, that's what's written in the book, and we've signed it ourselves. So the next part of the tefillah, and I'll go back to a share for a sec, is this famous line: Uteshuva, utefillah, utzedakah, ma'avirin et roa hagezerah. Our translation has given us, but repentance, prayer, and charity annul the evil decree. This is not exactly correct. There is a version of this saying in the Jerusalem Talmud that uses the word mivatlin, annuls the evil decree, but that's not what the poem says. The poem says mivatlin et hagezerah, that other version says, that cancels the decree. But this one says ma'avirin et roa hagezerah, it makes the bitterness of the decree pass away. It averts the bitterness. It doesn't avert the decree, it averts the bitterness. So what I would like to ask you, the three of us, or three of you and the four of us in this conversation, is how do those things work? Teshuva, repentance, tefillah, prayer, tzedakah, acts of justice and charity. How do they, or to what extent do they, or in what ways do they actually make the bitterness pass away? Which of those come easiest to you and make the most sense to you? Which of those are more of a challenge for you? So let's start with teshuva. How does penitence, or can penitence, make the bitterness of the reality, the painful reality of mortality, how does it go away? Debbie?
For me, this year, this spiritual inventory, this opportunity to say, this is the end of the fiscal spiritual year. I get a chance to take a look at how I showed up or didn't show up, how I forgave or didn't forgive. It gives me, this is something very optimistic about the nature of humans, that we can take a look at this stuff, and the prayer believes that we can change. And that's very powerful for me. So I think that's very reassuring.
It's empowering. Yeah, go ahead.
Because it can be small, dedicated, unexpected acts of mitzvot or creation or loving kindness or whatever it's going to be. I'm not going to rock the world, but the prayer is saying to me, but you can change who you are and you can make a difference.
Just yesterday, I happened to be speaking with a young man in Joe Alban's family about his bar mitzvah Devar Torah coming up, and it was not what we in the end of the day are going to do, but his parsha is Noach, and one of the things we were talking about is in the story when God has to give up on all these people and start anew. It's almost as if God is voting in that place to think that people cannot change, and then we'll ultimately come to a place that says that they can change. Like, if I'm going to give up on you, then it doesn't. You have no power to change. But if I do think you have the power to change, that can be very empowering. So, tshuva, the knowledge that something might be different in your life, could be very empowering. Joe, you want to say anything about penitence as a way of wrestling with the bitterness of our mortality and vulnerability?
Well, I mean, I think that just like you said, it's this power of this is why Yom Kippur is the happiest day for any Jew of the year, because you get to have penitence, you get to actively take stock of what happened in the last year, maybe what you did or what you didn't do as an individual, as a community, and then think about how you can do it better in the future, how you can improve in your day-to-day life with your family and friends and others, and then also perhaps in a larger context too. And I think that is certainly the ability, because you don't have to, it gives you the option to do this so that we don't have to remain stuck. There are many times you talk about this in the Jewish calendar, but none of them as big as Yom Kippur.
Judy, anything you want to add?
I'm in sync with what these guys are saying. And the only thing I would add is that when I hear the word teshuva, I think of return. And so I feel like it's an opportunity to return to some core values or best self or something, and that can soften a decree, I think, or some commitment or realignment in yourself, some kind of return.
Between us all, we've had just dozens and dozens of Rosh Hashanahs here, and maybe, all of us, if you add up all our years, we've marked Rosh Hashanah dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And do you feel like your tshuva muscles the Judaism has helped your tshuva muscles train? You feel like prepared to do some tshuva?
I think you have to put yourself in that mindset sometimes because you do have to get ready for it, which is what Elul is for, but you don't always have time or you're busy with other things or
Yeah.
you have other concerns sometimes. Um, uh, uh, but
I kind of hope, yeah. I kind of hope that not kind of, I definitely hope that the year-to-year experience does train our muscles. If I play tennis one time, it doesn't make me a tennis player. If I go, go dancing one time, it doesn't make me a dancer. But if year after year I engage in this process, I think it makes me a person with the capacity for penitence. Okay, how about prayer? How does prayer um, or to what extent does it, or to the extent that it comes easy or difficult to you, how does that soften or sweeten the bitter degree?
Mm.
Somebody.
Well, I have a mixed relationship to prayer. I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue and I didn't feel so connected to prayer. And as in a kind of traditional way, that doesn't always feel like the biggest connection, though sometimes just
And sometimes we freeze. Sometimes we freeze up in these
again, the
moments.
coming back around of the holidays. I had an experience recently where I had a fall and it was very surprising to me. There was some sidewalk sticking up. I was in Brooklyn and it knocked the wind out of me and my ribs were hurt for a long time. But it was one of these things where you're like, whoa, what was this about? And and when I was doing some writing around it, um, it felt like a kind of knocking the breath out and made me want to pray. What can I say? That's the shortest way to say it. So I don't think I have felt, or more like when I was doing the writing, to tell you the truth, it reminded me of a Regina Spektor song where she says basically, I'm walking home alone past all the bars and corner delis when I heard God call out my name. He said, hey, want to grab a beer? It's just us. It's awful late. There's no one here, and we didn't even have to pay. And it goes on. And she says in the song, I'm becoming all alone again. Um, no, why doesn't it get better with time? I'm becoming all alone again. Stay, stay, stay. So I had that in my head, like, oh, there was some physical call to, okay, I can call out if I need to. Sorry, just putting that very personal
Awesome.
thing in there.
Awesome. We're going for personal. Anybody else want to say something about how prayer helps you through the who will live and who will die kind of fear?
well, I think there are moments in the service, like if you're there for Ne'ilah, there's this intensity of the openness that there's this last opportunity for you to pray and for to feel that intensity of what's happening on the day that helps you just it, it's an exhilaration almost of that moment. So I think that there's a lot of quiet moments where you might find it personally or if you're in need, but then there's like the holiday itself builds up to this intensity of it throughout the 25 hours of feeling it.
And as Joe's saying that, I just have to make one further connection, which is I don't think until you had done this, Jeremy, I had ever like lay down on the ground or prostrated myself
Mhm.
for Aleinu in that
Mhm.
prayer. But I'm now connecting it to being flat on the sidewalk in that prostrated way.
Wow.
And so there was some connection there.
That's intense. That's intense. Debbie, you want to say a word about prayer? You don't have to, but you
Uh,
can.
yeah, what I'm thinking about is we're all talking is there is the power of doing this and connecting with other people is very special. And I think when people joke about being the 3-time-a-year Jews, I feel like the power of that is that we have so many people that we can connect to across a big space. We don't get to do that often enough in our lives, to have those kind of broad connections. We're much more narrow. And so there is tremendous power. And I will say that in the last 3 years, with what's going on in politics, I also feel like my minor acts of being part of Beacon Shine the Light and other political activities, I feel like I pray with my feet. And that's also powerful because it's not by myself. And it's letting people know they're not by themselves. And there's power in that too.
Yeah, praying with your feet is, of course, Abraham Joshua Heschel's famous line. And in Henry Louis Gates's book on the Black Church in America, he quotes John Lewis as saying, uh, "When you start praying, you better get ready to start walking." And I think, and he quotes that as an African proverb. I don't know if it is or not. It has the ring of things that people say, as the African proverb says. But uh, since, of course, I know that John Lewis was with Heschel on that day in 1965, I wonder if Heschel hopped the phrase from John Lewis or vice versa. I don't know. I want to. It is certainly true. The togetherness, that communal bonding of all davening together is amazing. I want to add a pasuk from the book of Proverbs, which is not a typical quotation for me. Uh, Deep water is the counsel of the human heart, and a wise person knows how to draw it forth. Mayim amukim etza belev ish v'ish tivunot yidlena. And I feel the prayer part works for me because, in addition to the connective part and the singing together, and we are talking about a passage that is sung together, um, I think that prayer is like accessing the deep water in the heart and learning how to draw that forth from within you. And that to me is a really affirmative part of dealing with who we are as mortal, finite human beings. But you got to pray with your feet. You got to turn it into action. And the third item in our list is tzedakah, which does, of course, refer to charitable gifts, cash gifts or food gifts or whatever, but also more broadly to acts of tzedek. As this week we happen to be reading the parsha of Shoftim, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, diligently and resolutely pursue justice. So how about that one as a third one? This one is maybe kind of low-hanging fruit for description, but you get through the world knowing that some of us are going to die, some of us whom we love are going to get sick and die, and all of us are going to get sick and die eventually. So how does tzedakah help you get through that?
There's a beautiful piece in the Jewish Museum by an artist named Toby Kahn, who is part of the artist Beit Midrash. So artists study together for a year, a piece of text, and produce works of art. And the I think it was 2018, was tzedakah. And he turned the tzedakah box into something different. So his tzedakah box, he calls God's mailbox. And he encourages people to write their acts of social justice, kindness, mitzvot, put them in God's mailbox and look at them on Pesach Sheni. That's his time of year to do it. And so there is something so powerful about taking this old Jewish ritual of the pushka and saying, okay, it's one thing to add your money, but it's another thing to add your nefesh, to be refining your soul, the nefesh cheshbon. And I think that's what tzedakah does for us all year, but especially this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts?
Well, in the connection between taking the stock of what you've done in the last year, and then how to think about what you will do in the future to help others and the community at large, to help you um, um, uh, uh, work through these the big questions that you were asking already. That helps you think, oh, okay, well, this is what I need to do in the next coming year, because I have another year before I have to take stock again.
Yeah.
I think since you're asking particularly about how we hear it in terms of, lessening a decree or fear of mortality or things like that or suffering, um, I know experientially and I'm sure it's a documented thing, but it helps one feel better to do for others. I mean, that's absolutely true.
I feel like the the tshuva is a kind of turning inward to the self. Tefillah, a reach toward the beyond, and tzedakah, a reach into the human community. Like
Mm.
each of these turnings, I might be crippled by fear of mortality, like we were saying. Some people obsess and can't get out of bed in the morning or whatever. But these turnings of turning inward to the best self and turning towards heaven and turning towards your fellow human beings, that's they work to me as a beautiful triangle of how in the finite time that we have we can live with nobility and with depth, and that's what it's all about. So it's if you cannot figure out a way to turn your best religious instincts into helping other human beings, you haven't figured it out yet. And so the tzedakah part um, really, is the third necessary term here. There's another verse in Proverbs, you might want to say, one might want to say, see, if you do the mitzvot, you'll get to live, and death is something. This is not an adequate way. This is not an appropriate way to understand the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur metaphors. But we do have this verse: tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Charity saves from death.
Mm.
And people will, like tzedakah collectors will call that out. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. I remember one time I had a child on my back in Israel, and the tzedakah collector says, "Abba, tzedakah tatzil mimavet." Like, you want that kid to live, you better give tzedakah. But this is not a good way of thinking about it. But it is still true. Tzedakah does save from death, not mine, but the recipients.
Mm. Right.
If you give somebody something that's going to help them stay alive, then you are participating in life saving. So I do hope, I thank all the three of you and the four of you there. Hey, Harry. Um, um, I thank the three of you for joining me in this conversation for 30 minutes, and I wish you a wonderful Shana Tova Mituka Shel Briut ve'Osher. You'll have a wonderful, sweet new year of good health and happiness. And thank you all for being with me.